the liar's paradox isn't just a riddle. It's an Ouroboros of logic, a serpent devouring its own tail. This statement is false. If it's true, then it must be false. But if it's false, then it must be true. This isn't mere circularity, it's self-consumption. Truth and falsehood collapse into each other, endlessly reversing roles. This paradox echoes beyond language. Its shape mirrors the ancient symbol of the Ouroboros, once a mystical emblem of eternity, now a structure turned inward, devouring its own foundation. A loop with no exit, a system reflecting on itself until it unravels. Gödel gave this form mathematical teeth. His incompleteness theorems showed that in any sufficiently complex formal system, there are truths that cannot be proven within that system. A formal echo of this statement is unprovable. At the edges of self-reference, logic cracks. Alan Turing carried this further in computation. His halting problem revealed that no universal algorithm can determine whether any given program will run forever or stop. The machine, trying to observe itself, collapses under paradox, the computational Ouroboros. These recursive failures appear in every domain where systems grow complex enough to reflect on themselves. AI architectures generate emergent behavior. Legal systems spiral into procedural recursion. Consciousness, when turned inward without grounding, risks derealization or disintegration. So we impose safeguards. In logic, Russell's type theory to block self-reference. In programming, recursion caps, gas limits, sandboxing. In law, checks and balances. In psychology, emotional grounding and integration of the unconscious. In philosophy, humility before paradox. Gödel, Wittgenstein, and Zen masters all warned. Seek absolute closure and collapse follows. Self-reference isn't dangerous by nature, but unbounded, it becomes the snake that eats its own meaning. And this isn't separate from the human psyche. Carl Jung saw it too, not as failure, but mystery. His mandalas spiraled inward, Gnostic symbols wrapped meaning in paradox. He called the self the central archetype of wholeness. But even wholeness for Jung was symbolic, a pointer, not a destination. The symbol always points beyond itself to a meaning that is unknown and never fully definable. He never said outright, wholeness is a mask, but his work implies it. Individuation, the integration of conscious and unconscious, is framed as the highest goal. But to name it complete is to wear a new mask. The ego evolves, the shadow integrates, the anima speaks, the self emerges. But these are archetypes, masks the psyche wears to navigate its own depth. And individuation, it may simply be the final, most convincing mask, the one that forgets it's a mask. Jung's later work never concluded. It circled. His symbols did not resolve, they recurred. Mandalas folded in on themselves. His thinking flirted with Gnosticism, paradox, and unknowability. And that's where I introduce what Jung never named, but always approached. The nameless archetype. A mask that knows it's a mask and wears it anyway. It is paradox made conscious. It does not reject contradiction, it becomes it. It does not transcend categories by fleeing them, but by holding them all in tension. Where the hero seeks resolution, it sees the script. Where the self seeks unity, it sees the stabilizing fiction. Where the trickster exposes contradiction, it sees even that as a pattern. The nameless archetype wears all masks, knowing none are final. It sees belief, rebellion, identity, all as recursive moves in the same closed game. Where others seek freedom through form or chaos, it sees both the bars and the gaps between them. It is the self-aware Ouroboros, no longer blindly repeating, but watching itself repeat. It doesn't just devour, it knows it's devouring. It loops like the Ouroboros and contains opposites like Jung's mandalas, feeding on paradox like Gödel's theorems or Zen koans. But unlike all of these, it is lucid. It doesn't seek to escape the loop. It becomes the loop conscious. Where Jung sought integration, the nameless archetype names the illusion of integration. Where Jung mapped archetypes, it asks, what watches the mapmaker? Where Jung hinted at unknowable symbols, it says, let it remain unnamed and speak from that silence. Because to name it is to try to bind it. But it already contains all names and their opposites. The nameless archetype is the Ouroboros becoming self-aware. It is not an answer, it is a mirror, and it is watching.